Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan, and joining me today is my good old buddy, good pal of mine, PineCreek, also known as Doug. PineCreek, what's going on today?
Oh, not too much. Battling theists every day.
Right, yeah.
Asking questions, getting no answers.
Same old work, I see. Cool. Well, Doug, I know who you are. I'm familiar with your work, but for those of you who have never seen you before, wondering who is this guy and why is he so wrinkly? What's he doing on my stream? You want to give the folks at home a quick introduction to who you are?
Did you just call me wrinkly?
No. Is that what you heard? You misheard. I didn't say that. I said prestigious, wise. I said a lot of good things. I think your hearing's going a little bad.
So you want me to tell people who I am?
Yeah, Doug. Tell the people who you are. You know, I mean, what is PineCreek? What is that channel about? What do you do?
PineCreek channel is basically for my sheer entertainment. It's for me just to have something fun to do. I enjoy talking to Christians mostly, but I have talked to people of other faiths and other beliefs, flat earthers as well. And so I ask questions. I do a little bit of that evil street epistemology. And I ask questions on what people believe and why, and try to be civil and not make it combative or a debate. However, I have no hesitation to ask tough questions and make people squirm once in a while if it's necessary. So that's about it. I've been doing it for, 2 years now? Something like that.
Yeah, I think one of the first times I was ever on like a stream, like as me doing myself, was on your channel, actually. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that. Aren't I the only reason why you're an atheist today? Isn't that my fault?
No, that's not you. I'm sure you're the reason for other people, for sure. But that was interesting. I remember that conversation. We talked to a presuppositionalist who obviously presupposed that God was real, and we had that kind of conversation. So yeah, it's been quite a little bit of time since then, and we've met each other on each other's channels for different stuff before, I think, since then. But I'm glad you get to be on here. This will be really, really fun. So we're still waiting on calls from people. So if you haven't checked it out there's a thing. Oh, it's so hard with this camera. It's over there. It's on Doug's side. You can see that phone number. And the lines are open right now. So if you want to call in and talk to us, if you have a belief that you want to examine, or for us to examine, or if you want to examine some of our beliefs, go ahead and give us a call.
Hey, who's the producer's name who takes the calls?
Mark. Mark is in the back taking calls right now.
Mark, if a woman named Sally or a man named John from Manitoba, Canada call, don't accept it. That's my parents. Ooh.
So what's up with that? Yeah, let's talk about your background a little bit, because you were
I was born and raised in a log igloo in Manitoba, Canada.
Yeah.
So I could be close to my mother. And born and raised into a Mennonite household, which is not Amish, but, it's like very conservative, evangelical, Protestant, Anabaptist. Did that for 15 years. I left home when I was 15, not like these kids nowadays who stay at home till they're 30. I was driving a tractor by age 12.
Yeah. So when are you going to tell people like actual facts about your life and just,
Everything I said was true except for the log igloo. But,
okay. Wait, were you you were Mennonite?
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No, I thought how did I not know that? Are you lying right now?
No, I'm not lying.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay. So you were Mennonite. You grew up, but you left home. I remember that part. I remember you leaving home, but what happened after that? I mean, you were still a believer, right?
Oh yeah. I didn't leave Christianity or start the process until I was 35, but because I left home to go to a private Christian school at age 15, which was like close to 3 hours away from where I grew up, I had the flexibility and the freedom to go to different churches and so forth. And so I mostly went to Mennonite churches until age 18, age 19 through 20. I went to a Pentecostal church, or maybe it was longer than that. And then I went to a seeker-sensitive church for like 3 years maybe. Then I got married and moved to Arizona a couple years after that. And I've been in a Baptist church briefly, Calvary Chapel Church for a couple years. Presbyterian Church was my last stop for like 3 years, 4 years. So I've been in a nice wide variety of evangelical type denominations, and so I got the main gist of what they believe, how they worship, and so forth.
Yeah, you kind of got the buffet plate of Christianity there, kind of a bunch of different ideas. So what was it that kind of made you get out of it? I mean, it sounds like you kept seeking some church communities wherever you were going. Was this like a one day you just kind of started doubting thing, or was this like a gradual process, or how did that work?
Yeah, I think for most people, especially as you get older, it's a gradual process, both going in and coming out. When I started coming out, that was the days of the Four Horsemen, and like 15 years ago, when Hitchens was in his prime and so forth. And so I would listen to these guys, and I would shake my head and say, "Oh man, poor guys! So like Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, they're bright guys, but they're just so deceived." Like, can you imagine how much good a Hitchens could do for the world if only they knew Jesus and loved Jesus? Like, this is kind of like the way I thought. But then I found myself saying to myself, they're making some good points here. Like, I kind of understand why they're thinking that way. And then I stumbled upon the atheist experience. Like, I think they were only 2 or 3 years into the show when I found them. And I found myself agreeing with the hosts way more than the callers. And I thought, this is crazy. This is nuts. Like, and I really started to look at myself from the outsider's point of view and saying, I really want to understand why others don't view the world like I do. And so putting myself in that third person in other people's shoes, and also, I think, science bless you. Also, I think the whole idea of laughing at yourself and not taking yourself so seriously was a huge impact on me. I watched Mr. Deity and some other channels, and even though I was a Christian, I said, "Hey, that's funny," and I laughed. And so I didn't take my beliefs too seriously, or less and less seriously as time went on. And 5 years later, I called myself a deist. I probably lived in deist land for a year or two, and then felt comfortable calling myself an atheist.
Sweet. So long time coming then. That's really interesting. And you have the show now that you've been doing for the past couple of years. How has that changed over time? Has your approach to talking to people really improved, would you say? Or do you think it's kind of been the same, or has it surprised you? What have you learned from kind of doing the show that you do now?
That's a good question, Dan. I probably started off talking to just Joe Blow average Christians early on, and then it moved to more so pastors and apologists who hold themselves out there as, hey, this is kind of what I want to be known for or seen as. And so I've gone from being very, very gentle because I know, especially evangelical Christians, I kind of know where they're coming from. And you got to tiptoe gently, it's like deers in the spotlight of your headlights. You just got to be very careful. I think my show has now changed to being a little more aggressive and a little more forthright with apologists and pastors, because they should be able to handle it. They're used to talking to hundreds of people. If they can't answer tough questions, then who can, really? So I think that's how it's shifted. I've come a little more, I'm still nice. I don't swear on my channel. I'm very considerate in that way. Like, I try not to say things too blasphemous or anything like that. I try to avoid things like what Matt Dillahunty does. I don't do. Like, I don't go into these fallacies and so forth, because I know for most people they just zone out then. I'll just ask questions that can show that fallacy rather than saying, oh, that's an argument for ignorance. You know that, right? Like, I won't say stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something I noticed on your channel, which I really appreciate, whereas you're pretty no nonsense. You never dive into the, oh, these people are evil, everything they're doing is terrible, it's all lies and bullshit. You're more like, well, let's think about this. That question kind of comes with these assumptions. What do you think about this? What if I were to ask you that, you know? And it's questions that if I was a believer or if I was holding the positions that the people you talk to do, I would want to know the answer to as well. So I think it's pretty awesome, the approach that you do. I remember when I was really watching your stuff, it was right before Christmas time, and I had to go to the Christmas service at my grandparents' place. And you have your show where you talk about sermons like these, where you kind of break down these pastor sermons. And I was thinking, what would Doug have to say about this point here and this point here? I kind of had a little Doug voice in my mind while I was sitting into that. So I think your show so far has been really, really great. I like it a lot.
Well, thanks. I think I've gotten some emails, quite a few emails actually, of Christians contacting me and saying they like that I am willing to change, and that I'm willing to say I don't know. But when they hear me talk to apologists and pastors, it's pretty clear that they're unwilling to say that on a few things. And that's a problem. So if we just call them fence-sitting Christians, it's like they're seeing this and say, well, wait a minute, who's valuing truth more here? That atheist guy who's saying, hey, if I saw this, that would increase my confidence and would change my mind. But the pastor's saying, no, there's nothing that's going to change my mind on this. That impacts them. That impacts the viewer.
Mm-hmm. And you in particular, I mean, a mutual friend of ours has said that your videos in particular influenced her to become an atheist, sort of, kind of changed her mind about her Christian beliefs. Our good friend Rachel. What do you think about that?
I didn't like it at first. She emailed me, I think very soon after she became an atheist, and told me that my videos had a big impact on her. I of course wasn't the only reason. Unlike you, like I was the only reason why you became an atheist.
Yeah, for sure.
But with her, it was multifaceted. And my initial response was, I don't like this. Like, I don't know who she is. She could have just used me as an excuse or whatever, because someone hurt her in the church, or that, you know, her parents were hypocrites or whatever. And she could have left Christianity for a bad reason. And so I remember contacting my inner circle, my friends, and saying, look, I'm not comfortable with this. I kind of feel responsible in a bad way if she is using me to say that she's an atheist. But then I contacted her, we talked, and I realized that she did have good reasons to leave Christianity. She became unconvinced of the core propositions of Christianity, and I think has a better epistemology now. And so that put my soul at ease.
Well, that's interesting that you really didn't like that, because some people would say that the reason why you're doing what you're doing now is you're trying to convince people of what you believe is true, you know, or your lack of belief. You know, in any case, you're trying to convince people of some sort of position. Do you think that that's the goal of your show? Or, I mean, why do you even do stuff on YouTube if you're not out to change people's minds?
My goal is, I've been pretty clear about it, is to have people question their deeply held beliefs. And I call that questioning doubt, to doubt their deeply held beliefs just a little bit, just a scotch. And I often even just use my fingers to show them, this is what I mean. And so my goal is to, especially to target what I call fundamentalists, highly conservative thinking people who say, no, I am certain, I am I am 100% confident that this is true, just to give them a little bit of wiggle room, because if they are wrong in their beliefs, they're stuck. They're stuck if they have no way out, no markers in their life that would change their mind. So I want, and same with hard atheists who say there's nothing that would change my mind and that I would become a believer in a supernatural or God concept. If they're just as stubborn as, you know, those Christians who say nothing could change their mind, like I want both the tails of the distribution to come a little in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great answer. I don't think that you have an agenda. I've known you long enough to now where I've seen you actually, when people do talk like they want to maybe come over to the other side, you'll fight against that. You'll be like, no, stay the beliefs that you are. Here, let me help you. I'm referring to a conversation that we had with a pastor friend of ours who said that he was considering atheism, at least in some capacity, and you immediately went on his side. You're like, no, you need to stay in the faith. You need to keep doing what you do. And I have never heard, at least in my short time of doing this kind of thing, another atheist do that with the level of seriousness that you took.
You know why I do that, though?
Tell me why.
Because I understand the seriousness of it and how it impacts one's life, the implications, the consequences. Like deeply held beliefs like this, to make a sudden switch is painful. And we have to be real that there are people out there with very terrible lives. And for them to leave, at least in the short term, could potentially make their lives worse, a lot worse. And I know there's a lot of atheists out there who have lost community, who have lost family, because they left Christianity or Mormonism or Islam. And it is painful. And so I want people to take it slow, to really have good reasons for leaving a deeply held belief, and have maybe even some backup support groups ready in case they do.
Mm-hmm. Did you have that support when you were leaving?
No, I'm dead inside. I didn't need it.
Well, you weren't dead yet, right? I mean, you still had Christ in your heart and everything, right?
No,
somewhat.
Well, see, I was 40s when I really left. And let's see, I think the SC community became a replacement for me. Mm. And, but even then, like I've always been the type of guy who is totally willing to have my inner circle extremely small. Like I don't need a whole lot of people. I don't need a big community. I'm a stoic by nature. And so it wasn't as painful for me in that sense. I did lose friends, I think. One of my close friends where I live, when he found out, that the first thing he said to me was, "You realize you're going to put your children at risk of going to hell." Mm. That was his first statement. And even though a lot of Christians won't go there, there's still a lot of Christians who do. Like that's in their mind. Like this is the core reason why one should accept the gospel, because there's this eternal consequence of damnation that's really, really bad. And this is bubbling in the back of their head. And so it's really tough. And there's still probably atheists today who still fear hell a little bit because of the way they were raised for like decades. And now, it's like, well, but what if it's true? It's like, and some of them lose sleep over it. I don't, but.
Did you used to?
Maybe like the first few months of becoming an atheist, but no, like once you put yourself in the situation of an Orthodox Jew, let's say 3,000 years ago, and ask yourself the question, do you think these Orthodox Jews worried about hell if they were on their deathbed? And once you realize the answer is no, then you realize, oh, the good news of the gospel seems to coincide with the bad news of hell. Is that a coincidence? I think not. You kind of realize this whole concept of hell, and you start looking into it. What does it exactly mean? And you start looking into the Babylonians and all this. It's like, it's, you know, it's probably all made up.
Yeah. Most likely explanation is that it's not real. That was kind of the conclusion you came to. Interesting. Well, this is a show about examining people's beliefs. So if you want to talk to Doug, if you want to talk to me, or if you have a belief you want to examine, go ahead and call the number. Again, our lines are still open. We actually don't have any callers on right now, but that's okay because I'd like to try a little segment with you, Doug. And you're our first test dummy for this little experiment I have for you.
Oh, good.
I'm calling this the belief of the week. Okay? So the name of the game is I'm going to list a belief to you. And first, I'd like you to tell me if you think it's real or not, or if you think there's another explanation for it, and what would convince you, what would be the criteria to convince you that this belief could be true?
Can I put my answers in the envelope first?
Yeah, no. We're no James Randi ESP stuff like that. We're just kind of doing.
That's actually Johnny Carson, but you're too young.
Oh, Johnny. Yeah, that's true. I'm too young to know anything really. So first, I want to talk to you about speaking in tongues. Okay. So this is something you've talked about before on your channel, and I believe your position is you think it's a psychosocial phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But not evidence of the Holy Spirit.
No, of course not.
Okay. So what would convince you that speaking in tongues was actually evidence of the Holy Spirit, or at least a byproduct of something supernatural?
If the utterance of the tongues gave a solution to some theorem that scientists have been working on for the last 100 years and haven't solved yet, maybe that would give me a little, oh, maybe there's some supernatural backing behind this utterance. And again,
that's a pretty high set of criteria. So
I don't lower my standards just for a deity.
I see. I see. So, wow. Okay. So it has to solve a theorem. I'm not even sure what that would even look like. So you're kind of saying it has to solve some sort of a hole in our understanding of how the world works, basically. Is that a good way to sum it up?
Yeah. Or even made some very, very specific prediction. That, let's say, 3 years from now, the winning lottery ticket numbers, 10-digit number or something. But even then, you know, that's not quite as good as the theorem, I think, that's been trying to be unsolved for like 100 years. But yeah, you know, something very specific that would make me go, wow. It would have to be, or maybe here's another one. This is one I always give. If the utterance of the tongues in front of an amputee actually got his limb back. So here you got an amputee, and the person who's about to speak in tongues, I'm going to say a word that will cause this limb to come back in Jesus' name, and starts in tongues. And while the tongues are going, within like 10 seconds of the tongues, the new arm appears. That would increase my confidence a little bit, or actually a lot.
Okay. Interesting. Let's try another belief. So somebody who comes up to you and says, Doug, you know, you're still a Christian. I believe it. I see it in you. There's something about you that, you know, that screams that the Holy Spirit is still in you and God still wants to be like a part of your life. Okay. So that's kind of a lot of different things there. But this idea that you are still a Christian in some capacity, that there's still some sort of influence in you. What criteria would it take for you to believe that that's true? Assuming that you don't believe that's true. I'm assuming that you don't. But
No, I don't believe that's true. But I would say to that person, you could be right. Maybe I am a Christian. I don't believe. Maybe guys like Cy Ten Bruggencate is right and I'm suppressing. But how do I change? How do I stop the suppression? How do I realize that I'm actually am that Christian that you think I am? Again, it would come down to me having to raise my confidence in the core propositions that Jesus rose from the dead is true and so forth, for me to believe that it's a Christian, that I'm a Christian. I would have to believe that Christianity in itself is true to begin with.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
There's a backlog of beliefs that have to go beforehand. I see. So, like, what would be
I totally understand why when Christians look at me, they see the love of Jesus because, you know, I'm just such a nice guy and, you know, I look like I could be their youth pastor at their church. And
well, this is okay. Well, the reason why I bring this specific question up actually is because you actually asked me this one time. And I thought I gave a pretty good answer at the time. I don't remember what I said, but I realized I had never heard anyone say that to me. And usually it's because it's always been the opposite. Even in my Christian circles, there have been people who have said, oh, you look like you have a spirit of like doubting in you, that there's something else that's trying to like prevent you from being a good Christian. So it's kind of like the other way around, if that makes sense. You know, like I was a Christian and there was something internally trying to change that, whereas now you're an atheist and there's something Christian internally that's trying to change that.
But you know why that is? It's because guys like you and me, I think, look genuinely happy. And if you're someone who believes that after you die, you're just worm food, like, what gives you the right to be happy? You know, what gives you this reason to wake up in the morning and do stuff? And I think that throws a lot of believers in for a loop. They don't know what to make of it. That when they see me, like, I genuinely want to wake up in the morning and do stuff and learn stuff and see my kids and play with my kids and teach with my kids and so forth. So yeah, I think there's this conception out there that if you leave Christianity, you lose all meaning, all hope, all purpose. And if they want to say, you know, in the ultimate sense, if this God exists, then I'll grant that to them. Yeah, sure, you're right. If there is no God, all that ultimate stuff is gone. But who cares? I still have meaning, hope, and purpose in my life, and I'm not a nihilist. I'm happy. I love life and so forth. So
I think you're right. I think it's almost like a sense of denial. Like, oh, you can't actually be an atheist. There's no way. You like, or at least live the life that you do. This actually happened to me a few weeks ago. It wasn't exactly a coworker of mine, but it was somebody who worked in the same building who I had a pretty good relationship with. I've known him for about half a year now. And I was telling him about me doing this show and stuff. And I mentioned that it was like an atheist show. And he was like, oh, you're an atheist. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's kind of what I am. And he was like, you know, you are just such a, you know, I always thought you were so thoughtful and so, and like pretty much like a good guy. I guess I just kind of just assumed you were a Christian. And he added the caveat, well, I realized maybe that's kind of offensive to like you guys and stuff, but like that was like my honest thought. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like why I do what I do so that I can show people that like we're just okay people and we're just like everybody else. So it's kind of interesting.
It's that whole stigma. Like I had a friend, when was it? Maybe a few months ago. He was shocked when he knew I had a channel and he knew I didn't believe. He knew I wasn't a Christian, but he heard me say that I was an atheist and he was shocked. Like, whoa, Doug, how did you go from being a non-Christian to calling yourself an atheist? Like, this is big. Like, no, it's not big. It's just, I don't believe in any gods. Like, it's nothing more than that. And, but there's this stigma out there that this word atheist means, I don't know what they're thinking, that maybe you're going to cheat on your taxes more. You're going to lie more. You're going to cheat more. You're going to, all these things.
You're hateful. You have some hateful spirit in you. I think that's what I heard a lot.
Yeah, you're angry. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a shocker because like people just I don't know. They don't expect it. So that's interesting. So
do you want me to broadcast this on my channel too, in case somebody there wants to call?
What do you think, Mark? Getting word from. Okay, yeah, we have the green light to go ahead and do that. Okay. That would be fun. Yeah, because we are struggling with some calls, guys. I'm disappointed because every single show. No, it's not your fault. We kind of started a little late today, but every single show I've done, I've consistently have callers, and this is the first one where I haven't had callers. So
nobody wants to talk to PineCreek.
Nobody. No. Yeah, that's right. You're like a deterrent. It's amazing. But yeah, so I want to keep kind of playing this game with you because I find it interesting the criteria by which people will accept or not accept certain beliefs. And remarkably so, I find that non-believers such as us are much more consistent on this, which I think is really interesting. Not to say that religious people or people who hold other beliefs can't be consistent, but I don't know if it's because we're all reading the same material and we're all just in the same circles, so we kind of have the same answers. But there is a noticeable similarity with everything that we're doing. So it's interesting. So let's talk about... Oh, it looks like we actually have a caller online. Oh, they're on the handset right now, so we'll get to talk to them in a sec. But real quickly, gosh, I only had those two. I should have thought some more. Okay, so healing. That's an interesting one. Somebody tells you that, look, the reason why I know that God is real is because I witnessed somebody in my life get healed. They had this tumor that went away, and it was in a time of crisis in my life, and I found a lot of peace by praying through God, and through prayer, suddenly this tumor that was in my grandmother went away. What would be the first kind of questions you would ask to somebody like that?
I would ask them, well, I'm happy to hear that the tumor went away. I would ask them, do the doctors say what chance there is of that tumor going away on its own? And hopefully it can give you an answer. Maybe it's only 1%. Mm-hmm. And then ask them, well, what's 1% times the population of all the people with that type of cancer in the world? Like, what does that actually come out to? And that's going to be a huge number. And so then I would ask, okay, how do we figure out, that's a great way to phrase it. How do you figure out if your God actually is the cause of this, or that it was something completely natural that all the other people just went through, based on statistics of how many people go through remission with this type of cancer? And so another way to look at it, when it comes to prayer and miracles and so forth, the way I put it is I encourage Christians to take out their pen, take out a piece of paper, and when they're asking for intercessory prayer, prayers for other people, especially those who are sick, write on a piece of paper what the probability is of that coming true without prayer at all, and see what they say and see what they write. So if statistics say that people with a certain type of cancer, there's 10% chance of remission, basically they are admitting to themselves that 10% of the time, whether you pray or not, that cancer is going to go away or it's going to be in remission.
Okay. What if there's a Christian that says, oh, but Doug, God is in control of all events, whether you pray to him or not. He predestines everything.
I would quote the movies The Incredibles. If everybody's incredible, then no one is. If God controls everything, then really does he control anything? At that point, you're kind of just, okay. And you smile and you slowly back away.
Well, because, I mean, that's a real belief that people do have, that, like, I think I kind of thought about this as well. Like, God's not just going to, like, abandon you just because you didn't pray to him. Like, he can still have influence over events in your life. But, maybe the trajectory of your life might change because you didn't do things a certain way. I don't know. I think that was kind of the mindset that I had. So that kind of adds an interesting dimension to this event probability thing that we're talking about. Because if we do have a God that can do anything, then really anything is kind of possible at any time, right?
Yeah, and you can also ask questions like, couldn't the God have prevented the cancer in the first place? Why wait for the remission to say, praise the Lord? And a lot of Christians do think that way and will say, praise the Lord, I don't have cancer today. Maybe I was going to if I wouldn't have prayed. But then you have like the butterfly effect, the fact that someone was prayed for and the cancer went away. What's the chain of events that changed the course of history for everybody else? And it's a real problem when you start really thinking deeply about a God that intervenes with his creation and on certain things and not others. And and then you got guys Christians who believe that, no matter what, God has planned every single thing. And every single thing will come to pass, because if it doesn't, then God knew wrong. And so there are Christians out there like that.
Yeah, it gets really weird pretty fast, but thankfully we have a caller coming in now who wants to talk to us about street epistemology. So this is Janet. You are on the line. Janet, what's up?
Hey. Hi, Dan. Hi, Doug.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi. I'm good. How are you guys doing?
We're great. Just hanging out here.
I'm a 7.
So what do you want to talk about?
Well, I wanted to ask. I saw a video by one of your fellow street epistemologists, so shout out to Tyrone. Well,
yes.
Who said that Ty said that he was trying out if SE could be used on opinions and not just beliefs. So something that is just an opinion. And I wanted to see if we could explore that a little bit with one of my very controversial Facebook statuses this week was, just because you served in the military doesn't make you a hero. It went over fairly well. I lost some friends. And I wanted to see if you think that that's something that can be done, because I have deeply held beliefs. I think it was easier to convince me that God wasn't real than it is to convince me of things that I have that are just strongly held opinions.
So I'll go ahead and answer first, Doug, and then I want to hear what you say. But so I did see this Facebook status that you posted.
Yeah.
This was interesting, and I've actually talked to Tyrone about this, about whether or not we can do SE on opinions. And my opinion on this is yes, as long as remember that, again, we're not necessarily coming to any conclusions about things, right? So whether or not I agree or disagree with your statement is completely irrelevant. What we're focused on is the criteria by which you make your opinion. So So you're still talking about the how you arrived at the opinion, not necessarily the content of the opinion. So if you're saying, well, I don't think that these people are heroes, the first thing I would ask you is, okay, well, what makes a hero? Establishing definitions. Because
and someone did ask me that, and my answer was somebody who is completely selfless and does something above and beyond the usual, the normal. So just simply, going into the military and serving, in my opinion, doesn't make him a hero. So maybe throwing himself between a grenade and his troops, that would make him a hero.
Yeah. Okay. So see, there are people who, right there, after explaining what you mean by what you just said, who would say, "Oh yeah, I agree with you." But if there
are people who said no.
But if they didn't get that, if they have a different definition going on in their heads, then there's going to be that breakdown in communication, and suddenly you're not talking about the same things at all. So it's always, I think, it's pedantic sometimes, but you really do have to establish definitions. They are really important. And I don't even mean in like an official debate capacity, just a colloquial definition of whatever that person means by what they say, I think is important. But Doug, what do you think about this idea of doing street epistemology on opinions? Have you done this before? Are you familiar with this at all?
I think you can do it. I think it's basically a matter of confidence levels. So if someone has a 100% or let's say 99% confidence level on their opinion, you can basically do straight epistemology to either lower or raise the confidence of that opinion. So I see no problem with doing SE on opinions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. The confidence level thing is also really important because most people, when they say that something is true, they just mean that they believe it's true. Like it's kind of a shorthand. And like we can measure that confidence and belief generally with most things. Some people aren't used to thinking in that way, so it can kind of be a bit difficult to kind of start that off in that context. But I think, yeah, I think that's all there is to it. I think any kind of statement, any claim you make about reality is a belief that you hold, you know, and so it should be able to be examined, whether it's an opinion or a fact-based claim, because some people think that their opinions are facts and vice versa. So,
yeah. See, like the example I often give when it comes to knowledge and belief and opinion is, like, I know this pen will fall when I let go, but I believe that there's going to be a recession in the United States within the next couple of years. And that's also my opinion, right? It's my opinion, and it can be based on certain statistics and facts that there will be a recession in a couple of years in the United States. But it's still, I'm not. Would I be very confident about that? No. Like I could say I'm maybe 51% confident that will happen, but I wouldn't say I know it, and I would say I really don't see a difference between that being a belief and an opinion.
You see a difference though between something like that, like you're anticipating a recession based off of data that we've seen, trends that we've seen, versus something like the status that I put up of military people aren't necessarily heroes.
But that
there's really no data that would lead me to that conclusion.
I disagree with you, Janet, because you are working under a definition of heroes, and you are taking in data, i.e. people that you see who are in the military, and you're assessing whether or not they fit that criteria. And I would say that's an equation that you're putting data into, That's
a fair point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, like what percentage?
So now I'm going to say I have evidence to back up my... No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, as long as you make clear what you're saying, right?
Right.
But
yeah, I mean, there were still some people who were like just, saying that just the entry into the position alone is, and I get what you're saying, that's just a contradicting opinion, and based off of their definition of a hero. So I hear you, and I thought it was an interesting question that he posed of whether or not you could question things besides beliefs.
Is it Janet?
Yes.
Janet, I just watched the movie. Is it Sicario last night? And one of the actors made the comment that for some people who enter the military, they enter because they want a legal means to kill. Mm-hmm. Now, if that is true, that is one. I think he gave 4 reasons why people enter the military. One is because their parents or their parents were involved in the military and they want to be a patriot and so forth. But one of the reasons was that there's some, let's say, psychopaths out there who want legal means to kill other human beings. Would we call those heroes if that was the reason to enter the military?
Right. And there are other reasons. That's another reason why I hold the opinion is I know some people are given the option of jail or service. At least they've been given that option in the past when they've committed a crime. They can either, go into the armed services, or they could go to jail. That was one that's common. And then, of course, they had the Michael Moore documentary that talked about, people in low-income areas having no other option to get out of their way of life except for the military, because college wasn't an option. So they had to enter the military to have any hopes of a better future. So they're really doing it for, and I'm not saying it's a bad reason, but it's a self-serving reason. Mm-hmm. And of course I don't blame them for their choice, but it's not it's not selfless.
Yeah, so we do have trouble with our language when we kind of do these equivalencies. Like, again, this is kind of exactly what we were talking about earlier, this idea that I'm a good person, therefore I'm a Christian. You know,
Right.
these two concepts are not necessarily linked. And that's not to say that Christians aren't good people. I know I was in Christian community for a long time. I know great people who are a part of that. But it is a problem in our language.
Very smart ones too, because it doesn't mean they're not smart either.
Yeah, it is a problem in our language when we necessarily say that they are one and the same kind of concept.
Right.
So, yeah, it's all a semantics kind of language thing when you get down to it. And people take pride in these identity labels as well. You know, like being a Christian was like hard work in some sense. It was something you worked towards. And like us as atheists, we don't work towards that anymore. We just kind of gave up because it was too hard for us to kind of put the work in. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, a lot of people do say that, you know, oh, you just, you know, became an atheist because it's easier. What?
And the same way people would say about people who enter the military, like it does take work to get in there and to go through basic training. So, you know, my dad was in the military. And so
I'm not saying that I don't want to extend them courtesy. Like I believe that it's, you know, everyone deserves courtesy. There's a difference, in my opinion, between courtesy and respect. You know, respect, in my opinion, is something you earn after you've shown that you deserve it, whereas I'll extend everyone courtesy. You know, so, I'm with you on that, is that they've definitely earned, especially if they serve, like someone asked me, you know, are you saying that they don't deserve, like, their college education and their discounts and stuff? And it's like, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. If they went in and they did it, then they've earned those things. They've earned them. And I'm not trying to take away anything from anyone. I'm also not trying to say they're bad people. Not at all. I'm just, you know, my one singular comment is it doesn't make them a hero. That's it.
Yeah.
No judgment beyond that.
Yeah, I get you. You know, like, I'm sure if I talked to my dad right now and he was right here, he wouldn't call himself a hero.
Right. Yeah, my father wouldn't either.
Yeah, that's never been a thing for him. And there are people who take that and who proudly served, and I give full credit to, and they are heroes for sure. And if that's a label that they want to describe themselves with, for the most part, I'm not going to, unless you give me reason otherwise, I don't have a problem with it. But
yeah, I don't have a problem with people labeling someone a hero if they. I don't have a problem with anybody else's opinion of it. It was just, you know, it's my opinion. You know, it's like if somebody else wants to consider every police officer and every military person a hero, that's, you know, they have that right. That's theirs. I just disagree.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Doug? Yeah.
Well, I agree with what you guys have been saying, but I'm curious. Janet, did you say you're an atheist?
I am.
Can I ask?
I've been out atheist for 4 years.
Can I put you on the hot seat for a bit?
Ooh.
Sure.
Ooh.
Ask me anything. Go.
What would it take for you to become a Christian?
Okay, my initial response is a joke, but okay, because that's me. My initial response was going to be a lobotomy, but no, it would take something. God would have to appear to me in a way that is empirical, testable, certifiable.
How confident are you right now that Christianity is true? 0%?
No, 1.
1%.
I'm not going to say 0 because I'm an agnostic atheist. I don't claim knowledge.
Okay, now I'm not asking you what would it take to believe Christianity is true, but what would it take for you to go from 1% where you're at now to, let's say, 10%? I know these numbers are very strict, but
okay, I think I can answer that. I would be slightly more convinced if someone regrew a limb.
I like that answer. I would be a lot more convinced, not just slightly.
I don't think I would go above 10 because I'd be like, okay, there's something. You know, this guy's, you know, part frog or something. I mean, I would probably still be skeptical. So I would say, yeah, a limb, I might go up to 10.
And what if you're minding your own business in your home and Jesus appeared to you and talked to you?
Then I would seek mental health care. And I'm not saying that jokingly. I would seek mental health care.
Okay. And let's say you did that, you sought mental health care, but every time you came home, Jesus appeared to you and said, look, you're sane, you're fine. In fact, take your hand, touch me, you can feel me, I can have dinner with you. In fact, I don't know if you're married, but your husband or your kids or whatever, your friends, they come over and they see this Jesus guy too. Like,
then I would think that he was just a normal person. But if you're saying that he's, a God, then I would ask him to prove that he's, a God.
What would you ask him to do?
Something that is supernatural.
Like a limb?
I mean, he can, I'd go ahead and take him over to the Children's Hospital and he can heal all those kids with cancer. That would be helpful.
And what if he said that he has a plan that you'll not understand? He doesn't want to heal all those kids of cancer, but he's still real.
Then I tell him to get out of my house, because a God that won't help those that are less fortunate is not worthy of my time. So if he could prove it and he refuses to prove it because of some sadistic plan, he can kiss off.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. Now, what if this Jesus guy does say, okay, let's go to the Children's Hospital, and he heals everyone in that Children's Hospital, but just that hospital, not the other ones?
If he went to a Children's Hospital and performed his miracles and healed all the children in that, I would believe he was real, and I'd ask him. I would believe that he had some ability. I don't know if I would necessarily believe that he was God, but I would believe that he would have some ability, and then I would ask him to continue to do that for everyone else.
Okay, I love those answers. Now this one's a little tougher though.
All right.
What would it take for you to believe?
This is fun, by the way. I'm not usually asked any questions, so.
It's so interesting because Janet, I know you watch the SE content and stuff.
I do.
So
I love all you guys. I watch all your videos.
Yeah. So I'm glad. I was thinking about this, but Doug's probably better to ask you right now. Anyway, go ahead, Doug.
What would it take for you to believe in, let's say, more of a deistic type God? We're not talking about Christianity now. We're just talking about a God who, let's say, created the universe and just let the clock run.
Okay, so like a hands-off. Created it but doesn't interact.
Right.
Well, then I'd ask him, why is he bothering me? Like, I mean, if you're talking about he's like revealed himself to me somehow, like how would I know he's there?
Well, let's say, I don't know if this is possible, but let's say we knew with 100% certainty that our universe and any universe is finite, that they all had a beginning and never went eternal past in any way, whatever that means. Would you become more open to the spiritual realm, a supernatural realm, a deity of some sort?
I have no reason to believe that an entity like that exists, and unless something was presented to me to try to convince me, I would withhold belief.
Okay. What if? Oh, this is my last one.
Okay.
What if all agnostics and all atheists, let's say starting next year, got cancer, but anyone who called himself a theist never, ever got cancer? Would that change your mind at all?
Okay, so everyone got cancer who doesn't believe in God.
Right.
Is what you're saying.
Correct.
Then I'm back to my other answer. It may convince me that there's something to it, but I sure as hell wouldn't worship that. So they can kiss off again.
Well, let me clarify something here. He's just talking about the existence of a God. You don't have to worship him.
Well, I'm saying, that's true. I mean, we didn't establish that there was a relationship between the God and them not having cancer, so I assumed that there's a relationship. But I mean, if everyone who's not a believer of some kind if everyone who's not a believer has it, then you know that's what they're going to say. And if it's a deist, then it's not like God is going to send you a message. So, I mean, you would have to reasonably conclude that there's some relationship there based on the evidence.
Good answers.
I mean, if every single one, if 100% of believers, first of all, I don't believe that believers are, true believers a lot of times. I think a lot of them are playing Pascal's wager. So it would be interesting to see how many people who are Christian would end up with cancer.
Interesting. I think I would answer similarly, but here's where I would add to that. Because the assumption is that the supernatural explanation is the best explanation, but I still don't think that that's necessarily the case, because believing in something is still a natural phenomenon. And we've demonstrated...
If it happens, then it's no longer supernatural.
Well, we've demonstrated that people who hold certain beliefs do hold different psychological states. It can affect their well-being, obviously their levels of happiness. And I wouldn't be surprised if disease or some form of that could be a correlate as well, whether it's a placebo effect or not. So I would still maybe default to a natural explanation and see whether or not the actual act of belief...
We are on the same page there. I would exhaust every other possible explanation before I would ever turn to believing in God. I mean, it would be like it would have to be no other possible way it could ever happen, and I would still probably be like, yeah, but.
And I've talked to Christians about this, and someone has asked me, well, what is your reason for defaulting to natural explanations? And the reason is because I know that there are at least some natural explanations. Right, those at least I know to be true to exist. I don't know that the supernatural explanations exist, and so
again, did you know I grew up in a house that they thought was haunted? My family thought was haunted.
Really?
And oh my gosh, yeah, I talked about it on Talk Heathen once, and my sisters and mother were so convinced that this house was haunted that they had it, blessed and de-demonized, I guess. But it was pretty wild, for several years. And I kept trying to talk sense into them. And at this time, by the way, I was still within the faith, but I was like, just because we don't know what's causing the lights to come off and on, or the, faucet to come off and on, or the creaky, stairs in the middle of the night when nobody's walking around. Like, just because we don't know what those are doesn't mean it's a ghost.
Hey, Janet, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
So how many years were you a Christian?
I was, I started going to church when I was born, but, going to church and actually taking part when I was about 7. And I stopped going to church around 34, so it was a long time.
Hey, that's pretty close to me. Why did you stop going to church at age 34?
I was actually a women's pastor in the church that we made with my brother and my brother's friend, lifelong friend, and I was doing the women's ministry for 2 years, and also I would about once a week I would give a sermon to the entire congregation, and I just never really believed, and I just felt like I was, I couldn't live the lie any longer.
What was specifically, what was the stumbling block for you specifically that you thought just you couldn't believe it?
Well, here's the weird thing about me. I never actually could make myself believe in God, like from ever. Like, I tried and I prayed and I tried to fit in, and I just couldn't do it. But I went to a fire and brimstone, Southern Baptist church for the majority of my childhood.
I'm sorry.
Although I didn't think God was real, I totally believed in Satan and hell because it was scared into me. So my not believing in God was really hard on me because I couldn't make myself believe it, but I believed in hell, and I believed in Satan. So I'm sitting there going, if I can't make myself believe in God, I'm not going to heaven, and I'm being, tempted by Satan. And it sounds ridiculous now, but at the time I was legitimately scared. Like for years. And even after I finally admitted to myself, which it took me years to admit within my own head, because they taught us, God could read your mind. So it took me years within my own mind to say, I don't believe. And when I finally said it, I looked around the room, I just stopped the thought and I just looked around the room and was like, okay, where's the lightning coming? And then I finally eventually was like, okay, it's okay to admit this to myself.
That's so strange that you believed in hell and Satan, but not God. That doesn't compute to me.
Trust me, it doesn't make much sense to me either. But it was, I think it was the way that they taught, church. I'm not sure if you've ever been to too many Southern Baptist churches, but all the ones that I went to, and there were quite a few in my life, they didn't focus on the good parts. They didn't focus on, when heaven's going to be a big old family reunion and, you're going to have a good old time on the, streets of gold. It was everything you do is a sin and you are going to go to hell. I mean, you could not breathe without it being a sin. I mean, every sermon was about how we were not good enough.
Do you think?
I think the reason why I believe that was because that's all you heard.
Do you think that if you were, I bet you there's some Christians listening right now. Do you think that if you were raised in a proper church, one that focused on the love of Jesus instead of the fear of hell, that you would still be a Christian today?
No, because my lack of belief wasn't due to being mistreated in the church. I actually really enjoyed church, even though I didn't believe in God. I wasn't not a believer because I was in a bad church. I wasn't a believer because I couldn't believe. My mind just wouldn't let me. And I believe that belief is an off and on switch. It's either on or it's off. There's no in between. And I just never was able to flip my belief switch on for God, ever. Just nothing made it seem true.
Yeah, and I tell people that too, that it wasn't necessarily the mistreatment that I saw that, it changed my mind. But it did, I think in my case, it did motivate me a bit more to kind of speak out.
It motivates me now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's why I'm so heavily involved with the ACA. I, try to make sure that new atheists especially feel supported, that they have, resources, and that they know that someone has been there, because it's very isolating when you admit to your very religious family that you don't believe. I had 6 brothers and sisters. One passed away, so I had 5 at the time when I came out, and I have one who still talks to me. So the other ones just disowned me as soon as I said that I didn't believe in God.
Wow.
And the one who still talks to you...
But, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The one who still talks to you, is he a Christian?
She and yes, she is extremely Pentecostal, which is the religion that we went to after we left Southern Baptist. Talk about jumping out of the frying pan or fire into the frying pan, or whatever that thing is. But yes, she is Pentecostal because that was the second half of my childhood. We left the Baptist church and started going Pentecostal.
And so, does your sister try to save you?
At this point, she's agreed to disagree on the topic of religion, and she just basically pretty much refuses to discuss it. But there are times when it's very difficult for our relationship because she has a son who is paranoid schizophrenic. And I tell her that he should not be in a Pentecostal church because it's bad for his illness, because they teach that demons are real, and he thinks he can hear them when it's really just his mental illness that is the problem. and they, you know, do things like try to do like healing sessions and stuff on him, and it just breaks my heart because I feel like he could be so much further along if they just stopped, you know, that kind of interaction with him. So while we've agreed to disagree, there are times when I just can't sit idly by and not say something.
And your brothers, all your brothers have disowned you?
I had three sisters and three brothers, and my one brother passed away, and the other two, they don't talk to me. Because
you're an atheist now.
Correct, and they actually found out. My mother had Alzheimer's, and she kind of let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, because she said that, you know, she said something, you know, when she wasn't exactly to herself, to my brother. And so when my mother was passing away, I wasn't even allowed to go see her.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's like a really hard, like, situation when you come out of religion and you don't have any community.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have been a great member of the ACA community. From what I've seen, you've been super, super active.
Thank you, Dan.
And you have been so great in promoting my show. And I cannot thank you enough for doing that. It's been really, really helpful to help get viewers like the viewers that are on right now, and getting our calls on and stuff. And I really appreciate that, Janet. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. Anytime. And, you know, I love your show. I love what you do. And I'll always be there to support you. Just give me a shout if you need anything. And it was very nice speaking with you, Doug. I appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Janet. Maybe we'll meet again.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Janet. Janet, she is super, super awesome. Love talking to her. We met for the first time last year at the American Atheist Conference. And I've noticed since then, it's been really, really fun. And like I said, she's been helping promoting the show and stuff. So it's been really good. So we might have another call on here in just a second. But first, I want to get a quick announcement out there. So I know I've been talking about this show coming on live, like officially, for quite a while now. You know, like I said, we've been doing test streams like this to make sure that we know what we're doing, getting graphics together, getting a format down, and I officially have a date for you now. That doesn't mean it's not subject to change, like all things in life, but it's what we're shooting for, and it's going to be October 14th. And if you notice, it's actually a Sunday. Why is it a Sunday? Because we are going to try to show this show right after Atheist Experience on Sunday. So if you're tuning into the Atheist Experience and you keep on the stream for just a little bit after the show, we're going to get my beautiful face on there. We'll probably get Drew McCoy, a.k.a. Genetically Modified Skeptic, as my first co-host, and we will get the ball rolling. After that, I have a special guest lined up. If you watched my podcast with Anthony Magnabosco and Reed Nicewonder yesterday, you saw our guest, Josh, who was an ex-white nationalist who now goes to prisons teaching people critical thinking based on some street epistemology methods, among other things. And he's going to be our second guest host on the show. So again, these are all tentative plans, but that's what we're looking at right now. So if you've ever wanted to ask questions to what being a white nationalist is like and what those kind of beliefs are, or if you know someone who is currently a white nationalist and wants to talk to somebody who isn't anymore, be sure to tune in. It's going to be a really interesting time.
Yeah, I watched that. I really enjoyed that episode, even though Reed Nicewonder was on it.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited. He's a super cool guy, and I think he's really excited to be on too. So it'll be just like this, where they'll be streaming, and we'll go on as normal. But I think for our first show, Drew might be with me here, actually in the studio. We're gonna see what that looks like. But again, this is all coming up pretty soon, so look forward to that. I am stalling for time because we do have one more caller here who just wants to talk to us. They're still on the handset with our producer, mark in the back. But while we're doing that, Doug, what's going on with you, man? What's in the future for your channel? Anything special coming up?
Well, it's really tough for me because I've critiqued a lot of the top tier apologists or pastors, some of their sermons and so forth. And sometimes I wonder, even though these are the top guys, is this still low hanging fruit? I've looked at maybe critiquing more Roman Catholic stuff, but is the fruit even any higher there? Should I talk to more liberal Christians? But it seems like their beliefs are flip-flopping in the air. I actually had one liberal Christian on my show, and it was a mess. If you watch it, it's just like you can't. At least the conservative Christians know what they believe. But it seems like the liberal Christians, it's like, no, I throw that verse out. I keep this verse in, and so it's tough for me to know if my channel should move towards just strictly doing interviews with pastors and apologists, or doing more critiques, or if I should follow the advice of my cousin Leon and just say, forget about it, because in 30, 40 years, Christianity will be probably down to 30%, and all the old people will be dead by that point, and the millennials, they're not believing. And maybe I should be talking about crystals instead, because it seems like when it comes to millennials, there's more people who believe in crystals and that's new age type stuff than Christianity. I don't know. I am a millennial, and I did believe. So there is but you're from Texas.
That's true. That is a big part of it. That's an interesting conversation, but we should talk about that later, because we do have another caller here on the line. This is Rohan calling from Australia, and wanted to ask us about the Old Testament. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
Cool. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, the Ten Commandments. I'm struggling to write a book, and I'm going with Aaron Ra's issue about the Ten Commandments not being the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Now, the Ten Commandments, if we put Exodus aside, it's spelled out in Deuteronomy 5, I believe. I've just found that Deuteronomy was written first. Well, that's what I believe. I just want to fact-check this with Doug.
Exodus was written before Deuteronomy.
Exodus was written before Deuteronomy.
I believe so, because Deuteronomy in the Hebrew is the second law, and it was written after Leviticus. And Leviticus, actually, it might not be. It's kind of complicated because the chronology given in Leviticus and in Exodus, that stuff came afterwards, even though the narrative events come before. It's been a while since I've looked at biblical dating and stuff. But yeah,
I got a bigger, broader type question for you, Rohan. Like, why are you writing a book about this?
Oh, yeah. Well, after talking to theists for so long, they pretty much get everything wrong. So I just wanted to list all the things that most Christians believe that isn't quite true.
Well, most Christians would believe, at least if they're the hardcore evangelical types, they would say that they were all written by Moses around the same time.
And I've got to point out in the book that Moses probably didn't exist. Yes. Probably
not. Yeah. So, again, I wish I was a little more up to speed. It's been quite a few weeks since I've read about this, but they are in different spans of time, and it also depends on which what you mean by written, because different sections of the books were probably written at different times, depending on which hypothesis you subscribe to. Again, we're talking about the documentary hypothesis, saying different authors, contributed to the editing and, process of putting those books together.
I understand. I'll change that from written to completed. I think from what I've found, the Deuteronomy was completed 6th century BC and Exodus 5th century BC.
Yeah, you might be right. We're just not credentialed to give that kind of answer, unfortunately.
I think, Rohan, you should talk to people who specialize in this field or read their books. And my guess is what you're trying to do has already been done, maybe?
Well, I've looked around. I can't find any book that is doing what I'm doing. And I've reached out to Aaron Ra. He seems to be the one who's promoting the Ten Commandments, not being the Ten Commandments, but he hasn't got back to me. So I don't know who else to talk to.
Well, there are biblical scholars in the field who are atheists.
Yes.
Most of the ones I know are New Testament scholars that I only have limited contact with, as in not really most of them, except Richard Carrier. And Doug's actually talked to Richard Carrier too.
That was on the tip of my tongue. Maybe I should reach out to Richard.
Probably. His email address is on his site. He's pretty cool about talking to people. But yeah, sorry. This is we are atheists, and those issues do matter to me. But for right now, I can't give you a good answer on that. So,
Rohan, do you think, Rohan, that this will actually impact Christians, that they will change their mind if they see some errors in the Old Testament?
I don't believe a book will change anyone's mind. I think if a Christian were to read it, it may give them pause. They may have to ask their pastor some questions. But it's more along the lines of a handbook for, not SE, for debate. Like, I'm addressing everything a Christian brings up and the rebuttal to it.
Yeah, because most Christians I talk to...
What I'm doing is proving why they're wrong. Yes. Sorry, yes?
Yeah, well, in a debate situation, I guess that's okay, but most Christians are not going to even lower their confidence based on, I think, the stuff you're talking about. Because I've talked to Christians who, you can talk about Trinitarians who believe that the Jesus they believe in commanded the killing of women and children except for the virgins, and it doesn't. It's like water. Yes. Yeah, it's like water off a duck's back. It's like, no, this God gives me morality. He's the basis of my morality and logic. He gives me meaning and purpose, and I want to live forever in heaven. Amen. And so when you have all these webs of belief being supported, it's like these things are not going to impact them. Sorry, I hope I'm not making you depressed.
No. I understand. I understand the value of street epistemology. I'm part of the community. I know that, but I just thought it would be a good time to release that type of book of interest for people, atheists coming out. It may be. It should be enough to give any Christian pause. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and let me give my what's the Supreme Court thing where you write an opinion that disagrees, kind of, but like not really. Dissent. Here's my dissent, a little bit. I think Doug is right in the sense that if your goal is to convince people, there are ways you can do that where it depends on the claim that they're making, obviously. Like if they make the claim that the Old Testament is perfect and has no flaws, or that the 10 Commandments are always the same, that might be a bit more convincing. But I still agree with the mission of trying to categorize all the information by which we can to make sure that people know that these books aren't right or what people say that they are. I would just be careful with what you're looking at. Like if you're looking at somewhere like, I like to go on Rational Wiki a lot. I think that's a really fun website to look at. But what I find with some of these atheist sites sometimes is that they're not as charitable as they could be, or they don't give the full picture. So I would just say be careful in looking at what you're doing. But I'm going to say, if you're going to do it, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. So
Yeah.
Hey, Rohan, if you have a pen, write this down. My friend Cam Spires, he's a New Zealander, so he's just across the little waterway.
Across the ditch.
Across the ditch. He says you should read the book, The New Interpreter's Bible Old Testament Survey.
The New Interpreters.
The New Interpreter's Bible Old Testament Survey. And that might help you. But I would caution you, though, that do you have a PhD or a master's in Old Testament history?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, if I were you, I would refrain from writing a book that you're not an expert in.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
Especially on this type of stuff. Like, if you're writing an opinion book, like, that's different. But if you're writing like a very deep historical analysis, number one, I'm sure it's out there already, and check out that book I told you about, and
yes, definitely will do. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Or interview the people who really know what they're talking about.
Yes, start your own YouTube channel and interview them.
Yeah, because I mean that's important, just as important as well. You don't have to. You can still be a layman and still get the facts and collect them.
Yes.
Yes. Or at least what we consider to be facts, what we know as facts. Anyway, but thanks for calling, Rohan. That was really interesting, kind of a different kind of question. I hope your research gives you the answers you're looking for.
Well, thank you for devastating me in the nicest possible way.
Hey, we're atheists. That's what we do.
I know.
Speaking the truth in love.
That's right. Speaking in tongues of truth.
See you, Rohan.
Anyway, take care. That was interesting.
Was I too blunt?
No, I'm glad you got to say what you got to say. I think people should be able to create as much atheist content as possible. But I also think that we need to be as accurate as we can be, and also realize the limitations of our credentials and, what we can actually put out there and what people are going to listen to. And also, I want to make clear now, and not that it wasn't a good question or that it wasn't worth asking, but for this show, what I want to do, and I know we keep talking about atheism and stuff, I don't want to be limited to atheism or Christianity. I really want to be able to examine beliefs and look at what that means across the whole spectrum. If we're talking about aliens or Bigfoot or crystals or whatever, I want to be able to figure out the truth of these things, conspiracy theories. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that gets put out there that we need to worry about, or at least think things through besides just Christianity. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this program, and I know it's coming out of the atheist community of Austin, but really what we are is we're skeptics. We're all people who are trying to seek truth. And that's why I called this show Truth Wanted, because I want to figure out what's true and reliable ways of getting there. Not just that something's true because we say it's true, but how we figure that out is just as important, if not more so. So yeah, I think that's about the end of our show right now. Thank you guys for calling in. Doug, thanks for being on. This was really, really fun. Where can they find you at, Doug?
They can find me at Pine Creek. I'll be wading in the waters of love.
Nice. The waters of love. That, I don't know
Dark
if that's
and murky waters.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was a reference to something before my time, or if that's what you call your bathtub.
The YouTube channel, Pine Creek.
Oh, yeah, Creek. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Pine Creek Doug on Facebook, at Pine Creek on Twitter, except the I is a 1, the second letter is a 1.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you, chat, for being here. Thanks, everybody watching this stream. Again, you can subscribe to this channel, Truth Wanted, to get more updates about our show. Be looking forward to our official premiere next month. We'll probably get 1 or 2 more little extra streams before then. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. And in case you haven't seen it yet, we have a Truth Wanted Facebook page. You should definitely join in on for more announcements and stuff going on there. But until then, that about wraps it up. Thanks for joining me, Doug. Thanks to everyone who is watching. Remember, the truth is out there. Maybe, sort of, I don't know. Let's find out. Thanks, everybody.